What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I got something different for you. Something that, as a horror fan, personally offended me. And I never even got a chance to read this close enough to continue being offended, because I just saw some things from abroad that bothered me so much that I knew I had to talk about it right here. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. This is just a fun video. I'm not actually so much offended, but I think some of you will be. I think some of you guys are going to have some pretty deep thoughts on this, perhaps agreeing with me or perhaps very much disagreeing with me. We'll see what happens. Either way, I'm willing to take the risk. All right? The scariest movie of all time. It's a very subjective topic. All right? My scariest movie of all time is probably not your scariest movie of all time. And that goes for a lot of people out there. Some people think Annabelle is the scariest movie of all time, while some people continue to sit on The Exorcist as the scariest movie of all time. It doesn't really matter. It's always been a subjective thing. But the guys over at Broadband Choices decided to do a little bit of an experiment called the Science of Scare. Alright? And this experiment, it got me a little confused. I kind of lost some faith in those watching horror movies out there. Is there anything better than a night in with the lights off and a truly terrifying movie that gets your heart pounding? We don't think so. That's why we explored the science of scare with our experiment to categorically find the scariest films for your scary movie night. Our team studied critics' lists and Reddit recommendations to curate 50 of the best horror films ever made before subjecting them to our test subjects. Watching each movie in 5.1 surround sound, our panel of 50 people consumed over 120 hours of the best horror movies, each fitted with a heart rate monitor to measure which movies got their blood pumping the most to find the ultimate horror movie and crown the king of Fright Night. So on paper, it makes sense. You know, if your heart rate's up, you're probably scared. I don't really think that's always the case. I think the experiment is flawed fundamentally, but that said, I get it. I get what we're doing here. We're working with it. And as I look at the top 10 list, it doesn't bother me that much. It's actually more offensive to me what's made it into like 10 through 20. Or perhaps the movies that have fallen to the 20 to 30 spots. Let's go ahead and let's just start with the number one movie, and we'll work our way down. The ultimate horror movie on this list is Sinister, released in 2012. You probably have seen it. It's a pretty spooky movie, and I'm not surprised that it is so high up there with some of the most effective jump scares we've ever seen. And in fact, it was number 2 in terms of spiking overall for jump scares, with only Insidious beating it out with at 133 BPM. I'm sure we all know what jump scare that is. So Sinister kept the average BPM at right around 86, with of course, your natural resting BPM being at like 65. And then the highest spike BPM, which came, I'm sure, right at the lawnmower scene. Again, you know what I'm talking about. That spiked all the way to 131. And the rest of the 10 here, I disagree with some of these being all that freaky, but some of these make sense. You got Insidious at number 2, then The Conjuring, Hereditary, Paranormal Activity, It Follows, The Conjuring 2, The Babadook, The Descent, and then The Visit. Other than The Visit, I would say in the right scenario, you're in a dark room, they're all rocking 5.1 surround sound. That makes sense to me. I'd say all those movies can really get you going, and it all comes down to that big spike. And every single one of those movies have a moment that will really get you going. I would say except for It Follows, all of those movies have a moment that really can jump your heart rate up. Although the rest of the movie may not be all that scary, there's at least one effective jump scare in there. But then let's go on to 11 through 20. Okay, let's take a look at these ones. You got The Ring, A Quiet Place, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 28 Days Later, The Exorcist, Hush, It, and Scream. So let me say, for one, I'm very impressed with the fact that films like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, old school horror films, The Exorcist, the fact that those can stand up with a modern day test subject and still keep your heart rate going, that's pretty exciting, and I'm glad those made it up here. But I see things like Scream in the top 20, and honestly, it's kind of hard to even call Scream a horror movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, so if you're a huge Scream fan, don't get all worked up, because I'm on your side. I absolutely love Scream. But it's just not a very scary movie by any means, so the fact that it makes the top 20 movies of all time, objectively based on this science project here. I think that's very interesting. The Exorcist dropping all the way down to 17, a movie that's been labeled as the scariest movie of all time for 50 years. The fact that it drops all the way down to 17 behind a zombie movie is interesting nonetheless. I definitely think if you were putting a list together subjectively, not objectively like this, I think The Exorcist easily makes it in the top 10. I think The Ring probably sneaks into the top 10 as well. Definitely scarier than things like It Follows. But the BPM doesn't say so, man. And the question is, if you're watching 50 hours of horror movies, you know, especially in like one run, you're only doing it in a certain time span, at what point do you desensitize yourself to the horror movies, all right? At some point, especially if you're going in like chronological order, you start to get to the point where you figure things out. You start to figure out the formula, and things are no longer scary. I would say most horror fans out there, like you and I, we probably don't really get scared all that much anymore when watching movies. At this point, we just enjoy it. We just take it all in. There's very few things out there that truly scare us anymore. We're very desensitized to it. I kind of feel like that's what happened with this experiment a little bit. But let's go to the bottom 15 here, 21 through 35, because I have a lot of thoughts on them. The Grudge, The Witch, The Blair Witch Project, Alien, The Thing, Poltergeist, Annabelle, Friday the 13th, The Orphanage, Dark Skies, Wolf Creek, The Omen, The Shining, Get Out, and Audition. I would say out of all of those, the one that actually like legitimately offends me, the whole reason I want to make this list comes to this one right here. Number 33, The Shining. Still, it was a movie that's been labeled one of the scariest movies of all time, and Scream beats it out based on this BPM science situation you got going on here. The Shining at 33, behind Scream, behind 28 Days Later. Unreal. I just can't, that's one I can't buy into. I can't buy into it. Get Out, though, shout out to it making the list, even though it continues to not be labeled a horror movie and rather just a thriller, which I still think is lame. You got robbed, Jordan Peele, at the Oscars. Just saying, not a fan of that. Should have been a horror movie. The Blair Witch Project is even higher than The Shining, which I suppose at the time, it was a pretty terrifying movie, but not so much when you look at it now because we all know it's not real. I think that's unreal. I also like they had a little note down here at the bottom that says, scariest does not equal best. The Witch and Alien were robbed. Okay. I don't know what they mean by that. Because, I mean, they're great movies, sure, but Alien's much more suspense-driven, and so is The Witch. Slow burner movies. That's kind of how I feel about those, so I don't really know. Friday the 13th is ranked higher than The Shining in terms of scary. Annabelle is ranked higher than... It's all right. But this begs a very important question to me. 1, what are your top 5 scariest horror movies of all time? Yeah, we're going to go subjective. We're not going to use science to do it, but I just want to know. What are your top 5 scariest movies of all time? Because I think in that way we can recommend each other's movies to each other, which is always great. I still think one of the scariest things I've ever seen is The Haunting of Hill House. Some people disagree, but I think that considering when it came out, has the ability to be very scary, and we don't see too many things like that anymore. Maybe a series, but I think it definitely ranks up there. This is something I'm going to dive into a little bit deeper in our podcast, Make Every Death Count, because I'm really curious what I actually would rank my top 10 scariest horror movies to be. I don't know. Does this list bother you as much as it bothers me? Very curious how some of these BPMs happened. How did Scream beat The Shining? I'm about to make a hashtag with that. Unbelievable. All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. And, of course, as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.